start, I'd like to, first of all, Mia Tree is going to be signing for me, for Paul, for Ram Dass during this next segment. I want to thank her for doing that for us today. I'd like to share with you another soundbite from our recycling crew, and I thought this would be appropriate at this time. Sunday, 12 a.m., Earth was created. Tuesday afternoon, life showed up. Saturday, at 2 minutes before midnight, humans came on the scene. 1/4 second before midnight, Buddha showed up. 1/8 second before midnight, Jesus Christ was on board. 1/60th second before midnight, the Industrial Revolution happened. At 1/80th of a second before midnight, oil was discovered. And 1/100th of a second before midnight, the oil is almost gone. I'm going to briefly repeat the little tribute I wrote and used on Friday night for Ken Kesey. He is the person we're honoring this year at the fair. This fair is in honor of Ken. The community in the world lost a neighbor, a brother, a father, a husband, a literary lion, and a social spark plug. Ken Kesey was a true voice of Oregon, a native genius, a 20th century American bard, a prince of pranksters, a master storyteller, and an honored member of our community. Following Ram Dass's address to you, he will be going over to the country store, and he wants to meet you, and you'll sign books. They've got, there's a little store, Stargate store, has set up a little booth right next to the country store, and Ram Dass t-shirts, Ram Dass books, and the all-time 10 best tapes will be available there. All proceeds go to Ram Dass. Be patient and gentle with him. He is an elder, but he wants to meet you and sign books. To introduce Ram Dass, our next guest is a social satirist, writer extraordinaire, prankster in his own right, founder of the Yippie Party with Jerry Rubin and Abby Hoffman, friend of Ram Dass, Tim Leary, Ken Kesey, and many other luminaries and revolutionaries in the last several decades. On behalf of the Oregon Country Fair, it's my proud pleasure to introduce to our main stage Paul Krassner and Ram Dass.
Thank you. I haven't seen so many happy faces since the Cannabis Cup in Amsterdam. If you've never been there, that's where they have like 23 strains of marijuana and a competition to see which is the best. And what happens is the first one always wins. It's not like a wine tasting ceremony where you spit it out. But after a week of doing nothing but smoking pot, we were very happy to get home and just relax and not smoke pot for a day or two. Because High Times Magazine once had a questionnaire, and one of the questions was, is it possible to smoke too much pot? And a reader wrote in and said, I don't understand the question. So before I introduce Ram Dass, I just want to say a very brief word about Ken Kesey, because a lot of us knew him as a novelist and a countercultural icon, but everybody sees him through their own individual filter. So many of us still now think of Kesey as being in that great psychedelic bus in the sky with Neil Cassidy at the wheel and Jerry Garcia on guitar and Tim Leary on acid. But when Kesey's granddaughter heard that he had died, she said, his little granddaughter, well then who's going to teach us how to hypnotize the chickens? And that was her relationship to him. Now, Ram Dass and I have been friends for 30 years now, and starting when he was Richard Alpert, and I've introduced him on many stages, and when he became Ram Dass, I had to introduce him as Ram Dass, formerly Richard Alpert. Then for a little while he changed back to Richard Alpert, so I had to introduce him as Richard Alpert, formerly Ram Dass, formerly Richard Alpert. And now he's Ram Dass again. It was from Ram Dass that I learned what LSD stood for. It was an acronym for love, service, and devotion. And it is not a multiple choice. You can do all three things simultaneously. And he has lived out those words in his work in working with the dying, in working with SEVA, which has provided no-cost operations for people with blindness in third world countries. Wavy Gravy, gravy. He's worked with Wavy Gravy, who also was Hugh Romney before he became Wavy Gravy. And in Amsterdam, I saw his son, who was named Howdy Dogood. And I had to explain to him, he's now Jordan Romney, but I explained to him, look, your parents meant well. To send a kid through school named Howdy Dogood is unintentional sadism. And so I asked him, I said, how old were you when you changed your name to Jordan Romney? He said, on my 13th birthday when it would become legal. So he didn't hesitate. So Ram Dass and I have had many great experiences, very high experiences and very down-to-earth experiences. The down-to-earth experience that comes to mind is when we were at a birthday party of a mutual friend, and it was held at a roller rink. And so Ram Dass and I were both skating around, and I think it was a counterclockwise direction, and he suddenly said, hey, Paul. I said, what? He said, how do you stop? And I said, aim for the wall. And it worked. So I just want to finish with the thing that I most treasure about Ram Dass, which was an interview. And after this long interview, I said to him, if we exchanged our philosophies, if I believed in reincarnation and you didn't, I mean, I used to believe in reincarnation, but that was in a previous life. So I said, if I believed in reincarnation and you didn't, how do you think that would change our behavior? And he thought for half a minute and he said, well, if you believed in reincarnation, you would never ask a question like that. And then his laughter built up to surprise, like a bell-shaped curve, to surprise and delight and triumph. And I have listened to that tape, that little piece of his laughter on tape over and over again, like a favorite piece of music. And so I'd like to introduce one of my favorite pieces of music, Ram Dass.
Thank you, Paul, for such a warm send-off. Somehow I want to grow up to be a satirist like him. This is awesome. this feels to me like the Kumbh Mela, which is it's two rivers come together, and right at the conflict, you're supposed to everlasting joy if you bathe in the two rivers, and only at a certain planetary configuration. And there's something like 10,000 people who are bathing in that place. And but there are 10,000 people, all of which are saints, sadhus, seekers. And I can't imagine any other place in our country than this. Because we all collectively feel the ambiance of this place. And I want to speak about planes of consciousness. George Bush has a plane of consciousness. The fair has another plane of consciousness. If you don't distinguish, I wouldn't be you. I think we've got to honor that we have planes of consciousness. We had in my psychedelic days, we had always charts of planes of consciousness. Aldous Huxley used to say, we have such profound joy in precious stones because they remind us of a plane, another plane, in which the pebbles all look like that. We had hundreds and hundreds of planes. And I've sort of I've got it down to 3. The material plane, the material plane, which includes the personality, all the stuff that the brain cooks up. We call that ego. That's playing number 1. Then playing number 2 is playing number 2. It's, although I've named it Soul. Don't take offense if you've got a special use for that. So 1 is ego, 2 is soul. And 3, we'll call 3. We all know we've got number 3 in us. But we can't talk about it. In playing 1, we can't talk about it. My guru was fantastic. And he was a number 3. The first time I met him, I had been a passenger in a car. And we'd stopped 50 miles short of the temple he was going to be at. And during that time, I went out under the stars. They were very Van Gogh stars. And they made me think about my mother. My mother had died 6 months ago. So they were present, and Mother was present. And I was going to the outhouse, and I stopped thinking about my mother. I was a Freudian in the old days, so I took that to mean, I took thinking my mother, I'm going to the outhouse. Oh, Jesus, I'm sick. But, and I went back to bed. And I was with this guy who he and I were walking around Buddhist temples. And then he suddenly got a letter from India, and it said, "Quit India." He had been in India, say, 7 years or something like that. And he said, could I borrow your friend's Land Rover to go to see my guru? I was very fond at this time, very fond of Buddhism. It's sort of very clean and And I never, I looked askance at Hinduism. It is calendar art and loudspeakers from the temples and so many gods and goddesses and oy. And so he wanted to go see his Hindu guru. We were on a Buddhist tour. So this car had belonged to a friend of mine. We had gone from Europe to India. And he had given to an Indian man, and he said, if Ramdas, if Richard, by the way, if Richard wants this, borrows it, I'm for it. And now I met this fellow who to go walking through Buddhist temples. So I found myself in this very fancy Land Rover. It's owned by David. It's now my responsibility. Going with this fellow who's driving, and I like driving, and going to a Hindu guru, I was just miserable. And some bad hash. And so we stopped at this stop that I told you of. I was going out looking at my mother, talking to my mother. And we start the next day on to the Guru. So we stop a little temple in the Himalayas. And the car is surrounded by Indian people. And this fellow speaks to them in Hindi. And it turns out the Guru is up the hill, off a stone walk, and up at the hill somewhere. And he's crying. He's crying because he's going to see his Guru. I wasn't going to see the Guru. I was defending the car with these Indians all around it. This car, a bastion of Western. Oh. And they couldn't understand why I should sit in the car with the Guru up there. And so they pushed me and taunted me and all. And you know what happened? My curiosity got the better of me. What were they doing up there with the guru? So I walked to the top of the hill, and there was a few yards away, there was a tree. The guru in a blanket on a wooden table, and many people sitting around him. And the fellow had driven the log rubber. He was doing Danda Pranam. He was lying on his belly, holding the guru's feet. And I said to myself, I am not going to do that. And so there was one of the Indians could speak English and Hindi. And every time Maharaji, this man was called Maharaji, wanted me to hear something, he'd speak through the translator. So the translator said, he wants to know if you came in a big car. He's needling me already. And yeah. Something else says. He says he would like it if you give it to him. I'm from a Jewish fundraising family, and I've never seen a closing like that. And the fellow who has belly on the ground, my friend, raises up and he says, Maharaji, if you want it, it's yours. And I tried to explain. Me trying to explain. And they were all laughing at me. That's really bugged me. So I had my hands in my pockets so I wouldn't be pronounced. And I didn't want any of this hocus pocus. And he goes like this, he sit here. And he said, you were out under the stars last night. I said, yeah, I mean, practically anybody is out in the stars, you know, that doesn't... And he said, you're thinking about your mother. And he read my mind, and I wasn't even coming to see him. I was a passenger in a car. And then I thought, if he knew that, Oi. Oh. He'll know. Oh. Just, I was looking at the ground, cataloging my, didn't want him to know. And I had grown up somehow that I felt that people would not love me if saw inside. Maybe some of you have that. So I'm cataloging, and I look up, and he's about this far from my face, and he's looking at me with immense love. Immense love. He loved me as I was. And have you ever come across one of those lovers? Because those lovers are unconditional lovers. Like I have a picture of W, and I have it on my puja table, and I have Jesus and Maharaji and all of Mishpacha. And George Bush and Ramakrishna, all the holy people. So I can see how far my mind is. By catalog, I go, hello Jesus, hello Mary, hello Mary. Hello. Ramdas. I'm taking the planes business. One is this one, which we'll call ego. Two is we'll call soul. It's also called the astral. It's the place where Campbell hung out. We're all bigger than life. And three is three. Now, W in Christ. I I think of W, and I get, my mind goes rigid, my heart closes over for what we did in Afghanistan. And then I'm in a realm that's very uncomfortable. I watch the realms my mind goes into. It's like I was stroked 5 years ago. And right after the stroke, I was in a very dark area. First of all, the stroke made me swallow funny and not these foot and the arm wouldn't work. And then I got aphasia. It's like you've got a place in your mind that is, after you have concepts, you have to this room, it's a clothing room, clothing with words. The word clothing room. Mine got bombed. So then I realized that all this meant I was going to be helpless. So psychologically, it was a real mess. I was so independent. Like I wrote a book with Paul Gorman, how can I help? Now, I write a book, how can you help me? That's quite a change. So that was painful. But then the most suffering in that whole situation was from the time I met my guru until the stroke, I felt like I had a graced incarnation. And then the stroke, I mean, he must have gone out to lunch.
So watch the gate to open, and those of you that are close to it, be aware you're going to need to stand aside.
Thank you very much.
Okay, he's approaching the gates.